Good morning to everyone, and thank you for taking part in this virtual edition of our Governor Talks for the Middle East and Central Asia region. I'm very pleased to welcome Minister Mohammed Ben Chaboun, Minister of Economy and Finance and Administrative Reform of the Kingdom of Morocco. We will have the pleasure today to discuss with you, Mr. Minister, Morocco's experience in managing the COVID-19 crisis and discuss the lessons drawn from that crisis. Faced with an unprecedented situation, Morocco reacted in a rapid and determined and exemplary fashion. As chair of the Economic Oversight Committee that was created in March of this year, you have overseen the Moroccan authorities' response to the crisis, and you have taken unprecedented and comprehensive measures to support businesses and households. It is perhaps, Mr. Minister, your rich professional experience in the public and private sectors that has prepared you for such a complex undertaking. In fact, after leading the Customs Administration and the National Telecommunications Regulation Agency, you moved to the private sector where you held senior positions in the industrial sector, and this was followed by 10 years as CEO of the Banque Populaire Group, one of the largest private banks in Morocco. You returned to public service in 2018 as Minister of Economy, Finance and Administrative Reform, and you have played a key role in Morocco's public action, in its government action. Today, Mr. Minister, we'll be talking about Morocco's experience in the light of COVID-19. The country has taken decisive action in response to this pandemic with regard to its effect on the economy. Morocco has mobilized its social actors. It has established a special fund to fight the pandemic. It involves public and private enterprises and also citizens who have made voluntary contributions equivalent to 3% of GDP to offset supplementary healthcare expenses incurred by businesses and households. Minister, you have given priority to social issues. You have set up a system to address the situation facing those who have been partially unemployed. This has benefited 1 million people in the informal sector. You have also provided social assistance to people in the informal sector through mobile telephony, and this has benefited some 5 million Moroccans. These examples of progress will certainly play a key role in social protections for all Moroccans. And we know that you are working on this in accordance with the wishes of His Majesty the King. Moroccan businesses have been sorely affected by the crisis. They have benefited from measures such as the deferral or carryover of Social Security contributions and also measures to modify bank loans. You have also announced an ambitious reform plan to support investment in Moroccan businesses, and you have designed support programs for sectors that have been most affected, such as the tourism sector. Mr. Minister, the Moroccan authorities and the IMF have a very strong relationship, and we stand by you. And we stand ready to make our contribution to help your country mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 crisis and its effect on the economy. In April of this year, Morocco drew close to $3 billion under the precautionary and liquidity line arrangement, and we continue to stand by you as you face the effects of the pandemic. We hope that we can look forward to seeing each other for the annual meetings in Marrakesh in 2021, and we're very honored by Morocco's offer to host those meetings. As part of this dialogue, I am very pleased to have an opportunity to discuss with you, Mr. Minister, Morocco's response to the healthcare crisis that the country is facing, and not only the country, but countries around the world. Once again, I thank you for your participation, and I'd like to begin by asking you an initial question. What are the main economic and social challenges that the kingdom must face in the coming years, owing to this double shock of COVID-19 and its economic repercussions. I give you the floor, Mr. Minister. Good evening, and thank you very much for giving me the floor to talk about Morocco's experience and to highlight some of the points you made in your introductory remarks. In particular, the way in which our country has addressed this situation, particularly during the period of confinement. I can't say the period of COVID, because unfortunately we are still dealing with that crisis. I think, first of all, if there's one lesson to be drawn here, it is that our experience since March shows that there is only one certainty, that is that we are certain of nothing when it comes to this virus. Clearly, every day we receive a deluge of information. That information is full of uncertainties. And in order to properly address the healthcare concerns, we have had to make sacrifices on the economic and social front. And this indeed was done over a period of several months following the initial announcement of coronavirus cases in the country. Yet today it is virtually impossible to continue doing so. It is untenable socially and economically. So clearly, we have to learn to live with this virus, to live differently, while we await either a cure or a reliable vaccine that can benefit the country and, of course, our citizens. Turning to your question regarding the challenges that should be a priority in the coming months for the Kingdom of Morocco, I would say the following. Morocco's priorities are well known, and the reforms undertaken are already well underway. The problem is that with the onset of COVID, a number of fragile areas have become evident. They have been revealed. As a result, the government has had to review its priorities, and I would group them into three categories. And these categories were mentioned by the King, His Majesty the King himself, in a speech earlier today. The first priority is social in nature. It can be summarized as the need to strengthen social safety nets for a country such as Morocco, and to do so rapidly, and to do so in a concerted manner, so that all Moroccans can have health insurance, so that all Moroccans can have a pension scheme, and also a family allowance that is contingent on the number of children or the size of each family. This program will be launched in January 2021. And Morocco has made it an absolute priority. And in essence, this is a challenge for our country. It's an extraordinary challenge because we're talking about 22 million Moroccans who will join the mandatory health insurance system in a 2-year period between January 1st, 2021 and December 31st, 2022. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have a family allowance system. This is designed to help families care for their children, in particular to provide for their schooling, and to also ensure that this applies to the private and the public sectors. And then the last area category is making sure that a pension scheme is rolled out and available to all Moroccans. We want to provide support. We want to strengthen the social safety net for healthcare insurance. The second area is that of the economic recovery. And as yes, there have been disruptions that have affected a number of economic sectors, particularly the sectors linked to the external environment. As you know, Morocco has a high level of openness to other countries around the world and free trade agreements around the world. And Morocco is also a country with a great deal of tourism. In the tourism sector, we welcome some 12 million visitors a year to the country. So there is a segment of our population that lives off its work in that sector. Since the beginning of March, since the pandemic was announced, the consequences for this sector have been significant. So we want to ensure that the economic recovery plan is a priority. And it will be implemented in an original fashion, in an innovative fashion. To be clear, we have set an overall budget envelope that is equivalent to about 11% of GDP. This is the overall budget for this economic recovery program. And of this 11%, it can be broken down as follows. We have 7% that will be for state guarantees to the economy, and 4% of GDP will be for a strategic investment fund that was just named the Mohammed VI Investment Fund. 1/3 of the funding will come from budget allocations, and we hope to mobilize 2/3 of the funds needed through our donors and our country's partners. We want to act rapidly here to inject the necessary funds into the economy to stimulate investment, and to do so using all the traditional methods of financing, including private equity. There will, of course, be a component of investment in infrastructure, particularly through public-private partnerships. So this initial envelope of some $5 billion will be set aside for direct investments, investments that are initiated directly by the Mohammed VI Investment Fund. The third pillar, the third area where we have set our priorities, we're taking action on the human front, on the social front, but we also need to take action on the economic front. So we have a number of initiatives that we're going to be examining through the lens of employment. One point that is very important for us and that we have already begun to work on, it's going to be reflected in the 2021 budget law, is that of public sector reform. So we will have a wide-ranging reform of the public sector. It will entail a restructuring of government agencies and the creation of a national agency for the strategic participation of the state, so that the role of the state as shareholder is recognized, so that the state is consulted more in that capacity. So we think we're going about this intelligently, because the work that needs to be done in terms of injecting funds into the economy, well, the state will contribute. Then the leverage effects resulting from that contribution will have a 5- to 6-fold multiplier effect on the economy. So this will occur through the guarantees given to enterprises so that they continue to work, or through the investment fund I just mentioned. So this will help us to take a broad-based action to help our economy resume its path to growth. But we're going to keep a vigilant eye on our macroeconomic situation and also on the path ahead. Our larger macroeconomic balances need to be maintained, particularly with regard to the deficit and indebtedness. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you for this very interesting overview. Allow me to come back to this new growth model that Morocco is currently working on. This crisis has also, it has shown some areas of where there are weaknesses, but it has also revealed areas where there are new prospects for the future. So what is your view of this economic recovery? What have you learned over the past 6 months? And how do you see this in the larger picture? Morocco is very well placed, well established in Africa. It is an important partner for Europe. So can you comment on this new architecture, this new model for economic growth, and Morocco's position in that architecture, particularly in the context of this crisis and future challenges? Thank you, and thank you very much for this question. I think we should bear in mind that there is a royal commission that is working on the new development model for Morocco. This model incorporates all of the elements that we just discussed, the far-reaching reforms and the vision of the country's future. I think one key point worth highlighting here is that this crisis has revealed some areas of fragility or some areas of weakness, particularly in the informal sector. You mentioned in your introductory remarks that we provided support to some 5 million households. Happily, today, information technology enables us to accomplish this goal and to do so in a dignified manner. Mobile telephony has enabled us to reach households without having physical contact and while also respecting the barriers that exist. We have also seen that implementing these reforms in healthcare are very urgent. I spoke about what needs to be done to ensure that all Moroccans have access to healthcare, to health insurance. I think it should be implicitly understood here that we need to undertake a reform of the healthcare sector, particularly public health, as part of reaching that objective. There are a number of priorities that we've identified as a result of identifying these weaknesses, but at the same time, we see that there are a number of opportunities. Opportunities to which opportunities that should be objectives for our plan, and that we should accelerate our initiatives in that regard. This includes, with the European Union, the green economy, health economics, technological innovations, and all initiatives that can help us to capitalize or build upon green energy. As you know, Morocco has been a leader in this area. We have made significant investments in solar and wind energy. So there are a number of areas of investment that are promising for the future for our region. and we believe that we can build complementarities with our European Union partners. And in that way, we can ensure that together, the European Union and Morocco can develop industrial niches so that we can become more competitive globally. So this is the vision that we have as far as industrial restructuring is concerned. And this is how we will work towards the economy of the future. Thank you very much, Minister. I'd like to come back to the issue of social reforms. It's clear that Morocco has ambition in this area. This is very well reflected in your remarks and in the comments and the plan developed by His Majesty the King. How will you move from the immediate needs that exist in this current phase of what I would say is the active fight on the public health front? How will you move from that to a medium-term or long-term view, particularly with regard to the economic recovery and this new social model? Can you talk about the capacity for financing a program of this scope? Yes, of course, the issue of financing is central, and I can summarize it in a few words. Overall, in Morocco, some 40% of the population have full healthcare coverage. Some 30% of Moroccans fall under a medical assistance program category, and these are among the most fragile in our society. They are the people who need to go to a public hospital to seek care up to a certain limit. We then have 30% of our population. These people have the capacity to contribute to a health insurance plan, but who are independent. They are not part of any one system. They can opt for private insurance, etc. The idea is to move towards universal health care. This will enable us to move from an assistance-based system, a free system, to an insurance-based system that is available to all. We don't have to create that system because it already exists for the private sector, the formal sector, and of course for the administration. So this system exists as an information system, how mechanisms for providing care are managed, as far as reimbursement for inpatient and outpatient care is concerned. It already exists. What we are going to do is to standardize the existing system. In this way, those who today fall under the assistance-based regime will receive a state contribution, a minimum state contribution, and in this way they will benefit from universal health care. Universal health care at a standard level. So the state will make a contribution to this population instead of providing services at hospitals. So it is a contribution by the state to this providing care in hospitals. So it's a state contribution to under an insurance system to Social Security. So we have done the calculations, and this will mean an additional budget envelope for the state, still a modest budget in relative terms, but it will give Moroccans who were part of the assistance scheme or who had no coverage whatsoever, it will give those Moroccans an opportunity to seek care, not necessarily at public hospitals, but these people will be free to seek care in the national health care system and receive standard reimbursements. Mr. Minister, my final question for you. You mentioned two elements, the public and the private, as part of a reorganization of the public sphere. Can you talk about how you see the dynamic between the public and the private sector?
Un État qui est actif dans la sphère économique. Comment vous voyez la dynamique entre le public et le privé?
Traditionally, in Morocco, we have always had funds, subsidy or support funds for investment. But these funds have always been sectoral in nature. And generally speaking, these are outright grants. There are criteria, of course, for accessing these subsidies. For example, we have the Agricultural Development Fund, which supports investments in modernizing agricultural tools and machinery. Another example, in industry, we have an Industrial Development Fund that operates in such a way as to support investment in that sector. The idea is not to question existing systems. Our conviction is that the private sector must play its role in economic development and growth, and that the state should act in a number of areas. For example, where the private sector cannot act, or the state can begin to act until such time as the private sector can play a greater role. During this period, the state's involvement will not be direct. The Strategic Investment Fund is a state fund, but it is a fund that will not operate directly in the economic sectors. It will operate through a number of intermediaries, for example, traditional intermediaries such as banks, with measures to bolster capital in this period where a number of enterprises do not have normal access to financing because they are indebted following the temporary or permanent cessation of their activities for a period of time. There is a problem of creditworthiness that has followed the problem of indebtedness, and it needs to be addressed in one way or another. A second point, this fund can operate through bank funds, as I said earlier, or through a number of strategic or thematic funds that operate in particular areas. These areas include industrial restructuring, infrastructure, and technological innovation, among others. So a number of thematic funds we are going to try to establish those funds and establish a private management for them, but they will be managed through specialized enterprises in these areas to stimulate these sectors. The purpose here is not for the fund to invest in these enterprises or to nationalize them. On the contrary, the idea is to give new impetus to enterprises, to give them means to strengthen their balance sheet so that they can access the necessary financing to continue to invest, to continue to employ people, and so as to ensure that the economic dynamic of our country continues its forward momentum. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I'd like to thank you for having taken the time. I know you have a very busy agenda. It's budget season, and you're in charge of many different portfolios. Thank you again, as always. I would like to thank all of those who joined us today for this virtual governor talk with the Minister of Finance of Morocco. And we thank him for having given us an overview of Morocco's actions and undertakings in this very difficult and complicated period, and for having spoken about the country's efforts to implement a system that will encourage the economic recovery in an innovative, environmentally friendly way, while also taking into account social concerns. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. See you soon. We look forward to seeing you in Marrakesh for the annual meetings next year as planned, and we hope we can enjoy your beautiful country. Thank you very much once again. Thank you very much. See you soon.